Hi folks, Bill with Legends Restaurants. Today what I want to do is I'm going to demonstrate cutting ribeyes and talk to you about our ribeye steaks that we do at our restaurant. We have a new ribeye actually that we're doing now. A lot of folks come in and they'll say, can we get your ribeye without the marinade? We use Johnny's steak marinade, been using it for over 20 years now, and that's our flavor profile in our restaurants. But some people don't quite, they don't like the marinade on the steak. Me personally, I like when I cook at home, I won't marinate my steaks at home. But if I'm going to marinate, I always use Johnny's. The main reason why I like Johnny's over some of the other brands out there is the sodium content. We have very, very, very low sodium. I hear that all the time. And you really can't over marinate with our Johnny's marinade. But we have a steak that we're doing that has no marinade, and we call that the Cowboy Way ribeye. And I had some friends of mine up in Columbia, Tennessee. They're actually, they're cowboys, and I got talking. They don't want a steak with marinade, so we got talking about, what to do and how to make come up with a steak without any marinade. So this is what we come up with. But first, I want to talk to you about cutting our ribeyes and what we do in cutting ribeyes. As you can see here, I have a whole ribeye loin. And these loins, this is the way they come to me, and this is your lip of the loin, and you can see it's got your fat content. So what happens? We can see this is what you call trim fat. This part of the ribeye loin here is called trim fat. What I can't see is the seam fat, what's on the inside of this loin here, and I can't see that until I start cutting this loin. Every loin is different. Every single time, every loin's different. That's the reason they have different grades of beef and so forth as far as marbling and from choice, select, prime, etc. But anyway, this ribeye loin here, the reason I'm telling you that is that when we cut our ribeyes, the menu says 8-ounce and 12-ounce ribeye. I never cut an 8-ounce ribeye to sell to you or a 12-ounce ribeye. I always cut heavier. So my cut specs on my ribeye is at least 9 ounces for an 8, and I cut 13 for a 12. So that's my cut spec. So, if I'm 8 3/4 to 9, 9 1/2, somewhere in there, that's ideal ounce or cut ounce for an 8-ounce ribeye. In 12, I want to be at least 13, right around 13, 12 3/4 to 13. To educate you a little bit. If you take a piece of meat, and I don't care if it's a ribeye loin or a New York strip or any kind of meat that you take, it could be a pork loin, and if you cut that meat 1 inch square all the way around and put it on a scale, it will weigh 1 ounce. Don't know why, but that's the way it works out. And that's how I train my managers. My managers are the only ones that I allow to cut steaks in our restaurants because, first of all, it's the most expensive thing that we do, ingredient that we bring into the restaurant is our steaks. So I want my managers cutting my steaks every time, and that way I can really try to get the consistency of that product. On my sign out there it says Legend Steakhouse, and if we're going to be a steakhouse, hey, we need to bring to you a good product. But the thing I want to educate you on is that if my menu says 8-ounce, I don't cut an 8-ounce for you. If you see extra fat, the seam fat in there, I cut heavy to allow for that seam fat is what I do. So if we cut our steaks properly, you should get a 9-ounce cut, and then when we go to grilling that, then if there's any seam fat in there, then that's how I try to allow for that. Because it comes back, I want you to get your money's worth. Pork, the protein right now in the industry out there is the highest I've ever seen it. From ground beef being over $3 a pound in the grocery stores now. I've seen ribeyes, as high as $9 and $10 a pound. It's crazy. So when you come to our restaurant to get a steak, and and you're going to see, hey, we went up on our menu price just like every restaurant out there has went up, or hey, everybody's going up. Seems like everything I buy anymore is a lot higher than it used to be. So bottom line, I want to make sure to do my best to make sure you get your money's worth. And so that's one thing we do. So what I'm going to do in cutting this loin here, like I said, I can see the trim fat here. So I'm going to go ahead and trim. The specs that come to, this product comes to me, it's supposed to come to me 1/4 inch trim. That's the beef industry, the standard is 1/4 inch trim. When you buy a steak at a grocery store out there, they're going to trim it down just like I'm doing right now. And we call this the tail or the lip, because you know they call them lip-on ribeyes. This will vary tremendously. And you'll see what I'm talking about. There's a lot of waste right here. There's nothing I can do with this fat except throw it in a garbage can. And I pay just as much for this as I do this. So anyway, I go ahead and I trim this down as much as I can, and then I go to cut my steaks. Now if you buy whole loins, and you can buy whole loins in your grocery stores out there, I mean they're out there, and you buy a whole loin, you bring it home, and you want to cut up your own ribeyes, then you know that's what you're going to see. You're going to see the trim fat, and then you can trim that off. You could just cut the steak and then lay it down and then trim off the trim fat as you go per steak. I like to go ahead and trim mine just a little bit because you know I'm going to cut to scale here. We use ounce scales, and we're checking every single cut. Well, I shouldn't say that. I don't check every single cut because I've cut steaks so long and I've cut them for so long that hey, once I get to cutting, I'll pretty well hit my cut. You know, the ounce target that I'm looking for, I'll pretty well hit my target. Now, what we do is I take this ribeye loin and I trim this edge right here so that I start with a good, clean, fresh edge. This goes in my grind in my hamburger meat. So I'm grinding up my ribeye scraps and trimmings and putting them in, you know, that's what I'm using. So I'm using this in my hamburger meat. So then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start cutting my steaks. Now this steak here, if you're cutting steaks at home, you can see like right in here on this steak, you can see that fat line. It comes right down just like so. Now what I do is I'll take that and I clip that. You see how I clipped it. If you've ever cooked steaks at home and you're cooking them and they start curling, it's because of that right there. If you'll cut that off, if you'll just clip that right there, when you're cook a steak at home, it's going to stay flat on your grill like it's supposed to. Now I start cutting my steaks, and what does that steak weigh right there? So 13.3, that's a little over 13.25 ounce steak. And what's that one weigh?
10.
That one's 10? Okay, that one goes to my 8 ounce ribeye. And then that's the reason we weigh every single one of them. Now, this one here, now on this steak here, you can see on the tail, see how that fat looks on that tail? That's more than 1/4 inch. And there's really not anything to eat right there. So we trim that off. And then here's the seam fat I'm talking about. You can see it right here. I can't see that until I start cutting that loin. And you can see it right there. This is your trim, this is your seam. So just to kind of educate you a little bit on cutting ribeyes, you know what we're trying to do and why we cut heavier than a 12. Most restaurants out there don't do that. Okay, what's that one weigh?
13.
Okay, this steak here weighs 13 ounces. This one weighed 13.25, and this one weighed 10. This will go in my 8 ounce ribeye pile. So here I am. You know, you might get a 10 ounce ribeye. And if I cut it 11 ounces, you might get 11 ounce ribeye for an 8. If I cut this 8 below spec, it goes over here in the grind pile. So, you know, I don't need that to happen because that costs me money every time I do that. So what we got to do is we got to really take our time and we cut each steak and we weigh each steak. You know, my guys have gotten pretty good at cutting steaks, so we're pretty good at what we're doing. And most of the time, bottom line is, I tell them every single time, if it's not to spec, then you don't sell it. Because I don't want the customers coming in here paying the kind of prices you got to pay for food out there in a restaurant and not get your money's worth. So if that's the bottom line for me in our restaurants at Legends. So anyway, I'm going to finish cutting these ribeyes, then I'm going to show you how we prep the Cowboy Way ribeye. 13.5. Notice the seam fat. Notice that seam fat. And it varies, I mean, it'll vary from steak to steak. I mean, look at those two steaks. You got a little bit more here and a little bit less here. I mean, that's just the way, and this one here don't have hardly any. And look at the seam fat. Whenever we grill those, you'll never see that most of the time. What most people see when it comes to the fat is that if I do this right here, like earlier I cut that tail off, and if I leave that tail on there that I cut off earlier, this is what you end up seeing a lot of times. You see where that was trimmed off of that ribeye right there. That's trimmed off, so if I don't trim that off and I put that out there on the grill, then you're going to get all this fat. This is what customers see more than anything versus this. Fat is where the flavor comes from any steak that you eat. That's the reason the more marbling, and marbling is nothing but fat. And you can see the marbling in these ribeyes right here. You can see that marbling. And that's pretty good marbling in that steak. The more marbling you have, that's where your flavor profile comes from. The more marbling, the higher grade the beef is, because bottom line, the flavor and tenderness, the flavor comes from the marbling, and the tenderness also, it helps the tenderness. Now, as far as the tenderness of our ribeyes and our steaks, I had a lady send me an email the other day, said it was the toughest steak she'd ever eat. And what happened with that particular steak, I went and pulled my steaks that we were cutting from, and the steaks, when they come in, there's a pack date on that box. And that pack date, I'm not going to start cutting those ribeyes until they're at least 25 days old. That's the aging process. You have to have that aging process to really get the tenderness of that. That particular batch of steaks was 19 days old. You wouldn't think 5 or 6 more days would make a difference. I like to have steaks that are 40, 45 days old, even up to 50 days old. The more age, it's nothing wrong with it. The beef industry out there will tell you, 50 days in a cryovac, where they, they'll hold these they'll let them age for 50 days. There's aging processes out there called dry aging. Very, very expensive. Good product, but it's just very expensive. Most people in the markets that I'm in, that our restaurant's in, I mean, it comes back, hey, for me to get $35, $38 for a ribeye, for this steak right here, it ain't gonna happen. I don't care how good it is. I mean, hey, it's hard to pay that for that kind of steak. So anyway, so just kind of remember when you come in the restaurant, I'm trying to educate you a little bit on seam fat and trim fat, and what we do to try to give you, your money's worth every single time when it comes to our steaks. And I'm just finishing them off. The other thing too that's happened in the beef industry is that the beef industry is allowing the beef to get bigger now. Used to, my ribeyes, we would cut ribeyes from a 13 and down ribeye. In other words, that loin would weigh it would weigh 13 pounds or less. The beef industry has increased that up to 15 pounds and down. So they want those, they're letting the cattle get bigger out there now, controlling the markets and some of the things that they do to kind of control the supply and demand, because if the supply is short and the demand's high, guess what, your beef goes up, and that's what happens. Now this particular steak, I get to the end right here and you can see this piece. I can't get an 8 ounce out of that, and I can't get a 12 ounce out of that. What we do with this is we put that in our grind, and your hamburger day that you order, might be this ribeye right here ground up. And so when you start looking at ground beef and what you're eating out there, you're eating whole muscle product. And a lot of ground beef out there that you buy in the markets, in the grocery stores, or anywhere. I mean, a lot of it. I mean, there's a lot more of that animal going into that ground beef than just, you know, the best part of the animal, which is, you know, the ribeye, and also the top butt, New York strip, and so forth. But anyway, we don't scrap that. I mean, that doesn't go in my garbage can. I grind that up and I make hamburgers out of it, or meatloaf. Now that we got these steaks cut right here, let me show you how we prep the Cowboy Way ribeye. A lot of folks at home, like I said earlier, a lot of folks at home are got your own way you like a steak at home. Most of the time when you come into Legends, you know, there was only one way you could get a ribeye, and that was with Johnny's. It was hard for us to, you'd come in, order a steak, say, hey, can I get it without any marinade? Sometimes you could, sometimes you couldn't. Now when you come in and you say, I want a steak without marinade, we're going to suggest to you our Cowboy Way ribeye. That's a 12-ounce ribeye, prep like I'm fixing to prep for you and show you. And for $17.99, it comes with a side item and a salad bar, or if, you know, a lot of our stores got salad bars, or you get a nice size salad with that. So for 18 bucks, you're going to get this steak. To me, it's a heck of a deal. So let me show you how we do this. Now, I use a dry rub and olive oil. And on your dry rub, we have a what we call our prime rib seasoning, and this is some special blends that I have made. I have a company to blend this spice mixture for me. You can go out there in the grocery stores. There's a lot of different grill mates out there, a lot of different dry seasonings that you have. But I'm going to show you how we do it and what I do at home whenever I'm cooking a steak, and I think it makes it so much better. So next time you're at home and you're grilling a steak or chicken, either one, try prepping it like this right here. Take just a little bit of olive oil, and I use olive oil, virgin olive oil, and rub this steak down with olive oil. Don't take a lot, a little bit much on that one. And rub those down. And then what you're going to do, depends on how much steak seasoning you like. But what the olive oil does, it allows the, first of all, when you put a steak on a grill, you know, a lot of times your grill's not seasoned. The olive oil helps your steak from actually sticking to your grill. And then my brother-in-law, he wants that char mark on there. You know, what we call a diamond when we cook a steak. It's got the diamond marks on there. He wants that char mark on there. And the char, it adds flavor to your steak. So the olive oil helps that. It helps keep it from sticking, plus it helps it char. But what I do, a lot of times when you're cooking a steak at home, you put the steak on, you cook it, and you flip it over, and right before it comes off, you take your grill your dry seasoning, whatever it is, and you put it on there, and you brush it with butter and so forth. Try it like this next time and see if this works for you. Anyway, this is my dry seasoning, and I'm putting a pretty generous portion of this on here. And this is our Cowboy Way ribeye. This is the way we do them in the restaurant. Rub those in, and then I'm going to flip that over. Now I use a patty paper. Actually, it's a peach paper. And I'll put that steak on there, and I'll rub it down with olive oil again. And I'll season this side. So I do both sides of my steak. Let that set for about, maybe 5-10 minutes in your refrigerator, and let that seasoning just really bond to that steak real good. And carry that out there and throw that on your grill and grill it just like that. And try that steak like that at home next time and see what you think. See if that seasoning doesn't stick to that steak pretty good. You're going to lose some of it, so don't be afraid to put the seasoning on there. Some of it's going to come off. We're going to go to the line here and we're going to cook one of these steaks and show you what this steak looks like as it comes off of that grill. This is one of my favorite steaks that we do now, because I do like a steak without marinade on it. Even though, I mean, I like our marinade, not a problem with that, but you know, every once in a while I like to have something a little bit different. So I put the presentation side down on the grill first, and I'll do a diamond mark on that. And as you're cooking this steak, like these grill grates run like this, I set that steak on here just like I'm gonna basically put it on the plate, and I start cooking it just like so to get my diamond marks. On this Cowboy Way ribeye, you can see the grill marks there. Now that steak was like this, so now I'm gonna turn that steak straight up and down with the grill like this. Now since this steak right here, no marinade, so we won't put any marinade on this steak. Where this particular steak right here, we're brushing with our marinade constantly as we grill. And that's our flavor profile with our marinade. This particular steak is our Cowboy Way ribeye that we put on the menu for those folks who don't like the marinade, or they want something different. Maybe they like the marinade, they just want to try something a little bit different. So that's what we do with the Cowboy Way ribeye. You can see the diamond marks there, and I can see the seasoning still on that steak. And we'll let those steaks finish off. Okay, this Cowboy ribeye here is about a medium rare temperature. And as I said, I'm plating that 11 to 4 with our fresh asparagus that we're doing. Now the only thing I do to that steak now is I top it with a scoop of plain butter. And that'll melt. That starts melting on that plate. So that's our Cowboy Way ribeye with our fresh asparagus we're doing. If you want to try something a little bit different, or you know, than the marinade, or if you don't like the marinade and you want a steak without marinade, we now have one. It's called the Cowboy Way ribeye. This plate right here is $17.99. Comes with your choice of side, and one of our new sides is the fresh asparagus that we're doing. It's really good, and featuring the asparagus and ribeye and a side salad. Get that plate for $17.99, say $18. Can't beat it. It's a good deal, it's good value, good food. Come out to Legends Restaurants, folks, and see us at Legends. Check out some of our new menu items. Let me know what you think. And like I've always said to you before, is that if something's not quite right in our restaurant, let us know. And because we will mess up from time to time. I'll never say we're perfect, and I'll never say we're the best restaurant. So just come on out, try our food, let us know what you think. And if it's not the way you like it, or something doesn't taste quite right, or you have a suggestion, let one of my managers know. We will listen. Again, thank you so much for your business, and come and see me at Legends Restaurants.